So welcome. Thank you for coming to our applicant information session for the UBC Dietetics program. I hope that you leave today with lots of your questions answered and knowing where to find more information that you might be looking for. So here's just a quick overview of what we'll cover today. I'm going to start with a round of introductions, and then I will go into a brief overview of the program as well as the application process. And then we're actually going to have the whole, probably last half of our session dedicated towards panel discussion and questions from you guys, the audience, for the panel that we've had here today that I will introduce shortly. So first off, I just wanted to introduce the Dietetics program team. So we have myself, my name is Katie Wilkie, and then they're actually here joining me today for moral support. I've got Ali Browse over there and Heather Woodward. So I should mention we are in a bit of a period of transition at the moment, as some of you may know. Our program leader, Carol Travis, retired last year, and our two regular dietetics educators, Kara and Tamar, are off on mat leave, returning in spring and fall of next year. So for this academic year, it's the three of us running the kind of day-to-day operations of the program. And I'd also like to introduce you to Tamara Cohen. Oh, she did stay down here. Just want to give her a wave to the group. Tamara joined us in September to teach F&H 380, which is the third year professional practice course. Or is it 381? 380, right? And then also, as many of you may know, in January she's joining us as our new program director. So that's really exciting. So we've got that full team here today, and then of course Kara and Tamar are coming back next year. I also want to take some time to introduce a couple of guests that we have from other teams here on campus. And first off, I want to start with Rob. Oh, sorry, not Rob. I was going to start with Sarah, but I don't know if Sarah was able to make it today. So we're going to come back to that. She might come in a little bit late. If not, I can give you a really brief overview of kind of the student services side of things. So I'm going to skip over to Rob and hopefully give Sarah a little extra time to get here. So Rob is with the UBC Center for Student Involvement and Careers. And Rob, did you want to just come up here and join us and say a few, or you can do it from there if you want, totally up to you, just a few words about you and your team and how you can support prospective students.
So there's a link there that takes you to Careers Online, so you can take a picture of that. This is just for any career-related stuff that we support as a central unit. We're in Brock Hall, the CSIC. And just for all of you in terms of thinking about your applications, but also just in terms of your career stuff, the resources that I think would be pertinent for you are a lot of our workshops you can sign up for. We have a resume interview workshop. We do, resume cover letter workshop, interview workshop. Just, I think, real nice workshops to allow you to practice telling your story is the way I put it. In terms of like getting closer to application, we also have a resource there called the Career Peer Coaches. That's a drop-in service where you come in the day of, you see what's available, and then we have a team of students that we've been working with. They're wonderful. You can have a half an hour kind of resume cover letter session with them. In terms of my capacity, there's only one of me, so the team offers up, again, any career advising one-on-one as well. But closer to in January, I'll probably, if you look at some of our newsletters, if you're in LFS, the newsletters, for instance, I usually put aside blocks of half an hour sessions, and I do probably about 2 to 3 hours in the week because of the volume of people who are just interested in terms of someone else looking at their application. So just kind of look out for that as well. But again, I really encourage you right now to take advantage of some of the workshops that are offered through our center.
Awesome, thank you so much, Rob. And Rob's gonna just be a little bit in our panel discussion later as well. And before I introduce the rest of the panel, I just wanted to touch on kind of something Rob actually already touched on a little bit, is there are lots of you and only a few of us. So the first place I encourage you to go when you have a question is to the UBC Dietetics website, which I'm going to show you guys around a little bit today, and also to the UBC, the academic calendar. But certainly if you can't find the answer on the website or on the calendar, then do feel free to reach out to us. If your question is tied to some sort of deadline, it's helpful if you can get in touch with us early, especially if you need that information in order to proceed with something that has a deadline attached. Just want to make sure you give us lots of time so that we can get you the answer in the amount of time that you need. So in terms of who to go to for what, LFS Student Services is your good first step for anything admissions related before you're in the program. But certainly if you have questions more specifically about dietetics as a career, it would be good to come to one of us on the dietetics team. And if it's more about cover letter, resume, interview prep, things like that, then Rob's team would be the best team to reach out to. But certainly we can help direct you to the right resource if you're struggling to figure out where to go. I know it can be a little bit overwhelming. All right, so now I want to introduce the rest of our panel guests that we have joining us today. On the very end, we have Evan Duxbury, who's a recent graduate of our program. We have I didn't do this in order. I didn't know which order you guys were going to sit in. Sorry. And then on your right, you have Jennifer Snyder, who's currently in year 4 of the dietetics program. And in the middle, we have Callie, who is in year 3 of the program. So actually, I just wanted to ask, maybe I'll start with you, Evan, if you could just tell people kind of what your background was before you got into dietetics and what drew you into the field.
Sure, so I signed up kind of as a mature student. I already had a degree from Simon Fraser in business and biochemistry, and I had a couple years working for a health authority in human resources, but felt that I wanted to get closer to patient care, and that's what drew me to go back to school here at UBC. So that's kind of what I brought into my application.
Awesome, thanks. And Callie, did you want to go next, just about a little bit about your background before you got into dietetics and what drew you into the field?
Yeah, awesome. So I did 2 years of biology originally, and then I switched into nutritional science for another 2 years. So this is kind of my 5th year of university now. I always knew I wanted to work in healthcare in some kind. I originally thought optometry, but it wasn't until I took an elective in my 2nd year that I kind of just fell in love with nutrition and was working towards dietetics and just really wanted to help people through nutrition. Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Jennifer.
It's a bit of a long story. I'll try and summarize it as much as I can. So I started quite a few years ago as a kinesiology student at Douglas College, and I kind of just went into it because I was thinking, well, I play sports and I like healthcare and I like helping people. Bang, like that's it. And then I took nutrition as an elective, and then that kind of changed my perspective of things. And I didn't even really know what a dietitian was until that class, and I was a little bit alarmed by that. And it was just kind of like a light bulb. I just kind of knew that I've always loved food and I've always loved to help people. And just through a lot of research, I ended up switching over to here, and then now here I am.
Awesome, thank you guys so much. And we'll hear a little bit more from you guys later on when we go into the panel discussion. Thank you. All right, so now I want to get a sense of who is in the audience today. So my first question, if you could just show by raising your hand, who here is currently a UBC student? All right, it's pretty much everybody. Is there anybody who's not a UBC student? And now I feel bad. There's a couple, awesome. How many people have visited the UBC Dietetics website? Awesome. And we'll go a little bit more into it today to show you where to find specific information that you might be looking for. Who here has known that they wanted to be a dietitian for quite some time? Awesome. And is there anybody who kind of just learned about the profession recently and is here to just find out a little bit more? Awesome. All right, thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to give you just a quick overview of the dietetics program here at UBC. I should mention that a lot of this information is on our website, so certainly, if you're scrambling to write down a date or something, you'll be able to go back to the website and find it, so not to worry. So this is a health professional training program. It is the only one of its kind in BC, and our graduates can use the professional designation Registered Dietitian, or for short, RD, upon completing the program, but also registering with the College of Dietitians of British Columbia. And I did want to mention, to register with college, it does require passing an additional registration exam, which would be separate from the academic component here at UBC, although I would say our graduates have a very high success rate with that exam, but just something to be aware of. So as a student, would enter this program into year 3, and year 3 and year 4 are academic campus-based years, and then year 5 is a practice education year, 39 weeks kind of out in the field, so to speak. You may have heard it referred to as internship in the past, but over the past, I guess it's last September, the terminology has changed to be referred to as practice education. So if you're wondering, if you hear practice education, it is what used to be called internship. So thinking about what is a registered dietitian. To be honest, that's a question I still get asked by my friends and family. So it's a good thing to reflect on. I would really like you to reflect on this question. The reason I ask you to reflect on this question is something we are looking for in our applicants is someone who has demonstrated that they know about the profession, they're committed to the profession, and they've really thought about the suitability for this profession for them as an individual. So I was thinking I might turn it actually over to one of our panelists. Did any of you want to share what to you it means to be a registered dietitian and what a dietitian might do day to day?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
That's a loaded question.
We can kind of maybe share each our ideas.
Do you each want to share? Yeah, that'd be awesome.
yeah, one of the things that attracted me to the program is how many different directions you could go with a dietitian background. And so it's difficult to distill that into a granular answer, but broadly, dietitians are the experts who can evaluate nutrition information and apply that to a specific situation that you're dealing with, whether it's a patient or something else, and then communicating a plan to that patient or whoever else is involved. And I would say that applies to almost any branch of the dietitian profession that you would get into. More specifically, it could be evaluating a certain type of case at a hospital, speaking with the patient about it within their constraints, and communicating that out to the patient, documenting it properly for the rest of the team. Myself in food service, I do a lot of listening to my staff, the residents in my different facilities, the dietitians that I support in my management team. So I solve a very different type of problem, but I'm still synthesizing that nutrition information to come up with a solution that works, and then communicating out to whoever is involved in that process.
Hey, Callie, did you want to share your thoughts?
I honestly think that sums it up pretty well.
Yeah. I was like, I have
That
nothing.
sums it up pretty well. Yeah. Like, it's a pretty diverse profession, and that's also what drew me to it. You're kind of like a bit of a voice of reason, and like, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation out there with nutrition right now, which is why I think it's a really cool profession to get into. And yeah, just kind of like translating that scientific evidence into improving people's lives and their health, or community programs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just going off, you guys both summed it up pretty well. Like, we dietitians are the experts in nutrition in such a variety of different fields. That could be food service and clinical, like Evan touched on, in community, public health, even like working for the ministry. Like, they all kind of share one common thing, and it's to improve the health of the relevant population that they're trying to help with, and all the kind of the logistical details that kind of go with what Evan was saying.
Thank you guys. I think you touched on like all the important pieces. A lot of the things I wanted to mention just kind of about the diversity of the profession, which we'll talk a little bit later too about how you can kind of learn more about that diversity if you're just kind of exploring dietetics as a profession. So I think I'm really glad that you guys mentioned that. You covered it perfectly. And the other thing I just wanted to add is that it is a regulated profession, right? So we have a regulatory body here in BC, and it is a term that's kind of protected. So not just anybody could use the word registered dietitian or dietitian. So it's actually protected by legislation here in BC. I don't want to speak for other provinces, but I know BC is. So just like the term pharmacist, for instance. So that's also an important piece of information to know. I was going to move on to the website, which actually it works really well to have me and Sarah come up and quickly speak about the student services piece, if you don't mind. Sure. We skipped over that slide, but it's just more about, I know Sarah, I just want to thank Sarah for being here. It's her last day with LFS Student Services.
I already cried, so don't.
Okay. So we'll pretend it's not your last day. Yeah, no, Sarah's going to be here forever. And just a little bit about kind of what academic advising is and like how they can support these guys as prospective students and prospective applicants. It's up to you.
My eyes are red, sorry, I've been crying.
I really appreciate you making it.
So student services in the McMillan building, but we really are there. We help current students in the Faculty of Land and Food Systems, but also prospective students who are hoping to transfer to the faculty. And then a lot of what we do is support students interested in dietetics. So from before you apply to UBC, or if you're already a current student, if you have questions about your prereqs, making sure you have transfer credits that are equivalent to a required course, or if you have any questions about the process before you kind of get into dietetics, we help. So second degree students, students who have students who have a previous degree. Transfer students, we really encourage students to kind of connect in with us as soon as possible. The earlier the better, because sometimes working out transfer credits or previous degree and how your coursework can be used towards dietetics is crucial, and we want to just make sure that we help you earlier so that if you are applying, you don't get any last minute information like you're missing a course or something. So yeah, a lot of it to do is with prerequisite course evaluation, transfer credit, and general academic advising. But if you have any questions at all about before you're applying, or backup plans, or kind of your plan before you apply, we're here to kind of help.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah. Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. All right, so hopefully that helps you kind of navigate when you've got those questions, if it's a student service question for Rod's team, or a question for our team. But like I said, certainly we can help triage you to the right person if you're struggling. Okay, so I want to actually go to the website, just because there is a lot of information here for you guys as prospective students. So one of the things I wanted to point you to is a page kind of about the profession. So just gonna, so our website has a lot of information about the profession in terms of kind of the job market, wages, salaries, the diverse areas that dietitians may work in, and we also have a link to the DC website. So has anybody here been on the Dietitians of Canada website? Yeah, so that's another really good place to look if you're just kind of trying to explore more about what a dietitian do in the various areas of the field they could work in. And also here on our website, you'll find results for the alumni survey that we did a little while ago. So we asked dietitians who graduated from the program if they were working in the field of dietetics, full-time, part-time, had they been working in the field since they graduated. So that can actually be a really useful source of information to see kind of where people go once they're done with the program here. So admission requirements, this is definitely like a student services topic, but, and definitely you can find this in the academic calendar as well as on our website. So if you wanted to apply for next September 2020, you would have to have 54 credits of university or college work completed by April 30th. So that would mean kind of the earliest anyone can apply as they're wrapping up their second year, but often people do wait a little bit longer than that to apply. We have some people coming in with second degrees. It's not that you need to, it's just kind of maybe by the time someone found out about the dietetics program, they need that extra year to maybe fit in those extra prerequisites that they didn't take. And you have to have completed the first and second year prerequisites. You do need to have a minimum GPA of 70%. Of course, that kind of depends on the cohort of applicants that we have that year, so I should say it does often end up being a little bit higher than 70%, but that is the minimum. And this is calculated based on prerequisites that you've done, so you have to have the prerequisites done, and also any required year 3 and year 4 courses that you may have already completed. So it does not include your electives. All right. So this is what the academic calendar looks like. Has anyone been to the academic calendar before, or the dietetics section of the academic calendar? Perfect. So this is kind of the official source document. So a lot of stuff you'll find on our website, you will also find here. And this mainly tells you about the prerequisites, the courses that you'll take in year 3, year 4, and year 5 of the dietetics program, as well as the fees that are associated with the year 5 practice education component. So that information is all here, and I've also got the link on here. I should mention these slides will also be posted on our website, as well as the recording of this session too, so you guys will have access if you're having difficulty locating any of these websites. So the application process, I wanted to spend some time just highlighting some key dates. Again, all on the website, so no need to scramble to write down dates. For the first part of it actually has 2 parts. There's an online application to the Bachelor of Science in Food, Nutrition and Health if you're not already in that program, and that has to be done by January 15th, 2020. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at a couple years ahead, it'd be different, but for this year, it's January 15th, 2020. And then there's a paper application package that needs to be handed in person. It is paper, and that's on January 31st, 2020. That paper application package consists of an application form, maybe transcripts, depending on if you did the courses here at UBC or not, so those instructions you'll find there, as well as your cover letter and resume, 2 references, so 2 forms that each have 2 different references to fill out. So that's what needs to be handed in by the end of January. From there, applicants are shortlisted and offered an interview. So we typically, like most years, we usually get about 100 applicants and we offer interview to 55 applicants. And that typically they're informed in early April if they're being invited to come in for an interview. And then the interviews take place in late April to early May. And so the overall admission score is based 40% on grades, 30% on the application package, and then the remaining 30% is on the interview. So it's scored based on those, and then we extend the offer in late May to usually 36 students. It does depend, sometimes it might be 1 or 2 more if there's been some program attrition, but the standard number is 36. And there's a couple other things I wanted to highlight on the website. So there is a whole page for prospective students. So you'll find it when you go to the website, and the easiest way to find the UBC Dietetics website is to Google it, just search UBC Dietetics, but I've also got the link on the slide. If you click on the prospective students tab at the top, you'll then see there's a menu on the left. And the top on the menu is the application process and deadline. So that's where you're going to find the timeline we just reviewed. That's why I said don't worry about scrambling down to write down the dates. It also has some instructions for you to do before you apply, how to apply, and this is also where you'll find those forms that you need to fill out for the application package. I should mention, I actually probably should have mentioned this on a previous slide, 2 things. One is to just always make sure you're coming back and looking at the admission criteria. So say you weren't going to apply this year and you were going to apply next year, you'd want to make sure you revisit those admission criteria next year because they can change from time to time. And the other thing I should mention is if you do get to the point where you have applied to the program twice unsuccessfully, there is a form to fill out to request to apply for a 3rd time, which can be also found on our website, and that would be submitted, we ask that that's submitted by November 15th, and then you'll be informed in early December if you've been approved to apply a 3rd time. And the reason for that is just someone who's had an unsuccessful application twice in a row, unless there's kind of been some significant work going on to address what some of the gaps were that were identified, it's unlikely to be competitive on a 3rd try, but certainly that is an option. Did you have a question?
If you do get denied or you don't get in, do we get like any feedback as to what you need to improve?
Really good question. Unfortunately, we can't because we can't provide individual feedback to everybody. But that's a really good question. It comes up every year. I don't know. Maybe if Rob and Sarah, like you guys, have a bit more experience with how you might support students who come, but I know that we aren't able to give formal feedback from the program to every unsuccessful applicant, just more from a resource constraint perspective.
Yeah, we do, just to add context, so I'm from LFS Student Services. Those are a team of about 3 advisors to help support LFS Student Services, LFS students and prospective students. So I have been an advisor there for 7 years, so there's going to be 3 people soon, but we typically we send out, the Dietetics team, we send out an email to students that don't get in, a huge document that basically provides feedback for students that don't get in. It is general, but it's also not general. It does give students kind of a list of all the things that students can work, but I know the Dietetics team and Student Services were not able to give applicant specific feedback. And the biggest piece is if you are applying again, I always just encourage students to just kind of work on all aspects of an application. I can speak to it more, but I would just say if you've applied once, if you're applying again, just build up your application all over again, because the reality is every year it's a different applicant pool, and every year you may be evaluated or things may have changed. So just really working on all aspects, and I would say if you don't get in, don't focus on one aspect. Like if you think it's your grade, still work on everything, because it really could just be a whole, it could be all of it, and the application is competitive. So just because you didn't get in one year, if you apply again and you've worked on everything, like you may get in. So yeah, they removed applicant feedback because it got difficult, but also really just think about it holistically, like how can you improve overall year after year, because it can just change, and also you change, and also the experiences you do change.
Thank you. And another actually document I wanted to point you guys to on our website is there's the required skills and abilities document, which kind of outlines, like, because grades is one that's very like black and white, you know, like we need 70% or higher. But the required skills and abilities document outlines maybe some of those, what you might call like soft skills that we're looking for. So you could use that as a way to say, okay, these are the skills that I want to improve on. And we'll talk a little bit more about later, but looking for opportunities to develop and develop those transferable skills and show how you've worked on them. But that was a really good question. Thank you for that. And then the second one down the menu on the prospective students page is the admission requirements. This is where you're going to find general eligibility, academic eligibility, as well as using this in conjunction with the academic calendar. Another place I wanted to point your attention to is the FAQs page. So again, before you get in touch with us with any questions, I would really encourage you to look here first. It has a lot of questions that we get asked on a regular basis from students all throughout the application process, whether it's before applying or once they've already gotten in and they're wondering about traveling accommodations and things like that. So it would really encourage you to kind of three places, the website as a whole, but also this FAQ page and the academic calendar as a first look for trying to answer any questions you might have, and then reach out to us if you can't find it. So I'd like to shift gears now to the panel discussion. And this is really an opportunity for you guys to hear from people who have been in your shoes, or people who have for many years supported people who are in your shoes. So I think this is a really good opportunity to kind of ask some of the questions that are a little bit more, maybe not so right and wrong, yes and no type questions. So I'm going to start off the panel discussion with a question I wanted to start with, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for the remainder of the session for questions. So my first question is, how can students increase their chances of a successful application to the dietetics program? And I thought maybe Rob, you could start us off by sharing your thoughts on this question.
Sure. I think of actually two things. Number one is apply. And it's not a joke. I think sometimes for you in your position, if you're trying to think of, do I have the right stuff? I'm worried, and like it sucks to be rejected. But I think like anything else, you have to take that chance and take a little bit of that risk and be confident in what you have overall. If you've done the work and you've worked on your package and you think you have something there, like please apply. It's like so many people don't apply, and you're already like eliminating yourself from that process. I want to encourage you with that. The second part is kind of building off of what Sarah was saying is I look at like, let's not overload you with more work. It's more like in your daily routine and where you're showing up here on campus, how can you build practice in terms of like how do you talk about yourself, how do you hold conversations, a lot of the human skills, right? And so that's hard. That's very hard to do, and it takes a lot of reps, a lot of practice, because you have to put yourself out there. But I want to encourage you, like big pitch plug, like something like LFS Tri-Mentoring, which Kelly was part of last year. The deadline's tomorrow. That's a great situation where you're paired up with a professional and another student, and you get to practice these sort of things that could help you in your interview and your application. It takes practice, and it's not easy. It's like school. If school is easy, we all know what to do. We have to study every day, but cut to, we're cramming the night before. So I just want to encourage you, knowing that in January you're applying for this, how can you do a little bit every day consistently? And I think that's looking at your classwork, your extracurriculars, and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Rob. Is there anybody else on the panel who wanted to share maybe, some thoughts they have on increasing the chances of a successful application?
So going off with what Rob said, like I completely agree with that. I remember I was so scared. I always never thought I was good enough to like get in. My grades were kind of on the lower side, and like I really struggled in my first 2 years, and there were so many times where I was just like, I'm not going to do this. And I think at the end of the day, like I think it was a conversation I had with somebody, maybe, I don't remember, but I think what I'm trying to go off of is just to really believe in yourself. Like everybody in this room and like all of us, we all have such an individual set of skills that differ from other people. We're all so unique, and we all have something to bring to the table. And for myself, like leaving a degree 3 years into a program I might not even get into was such a huge risk, but I was so sure that like I was like, if I'm not going to be a dietitian here, I'm going to be a dietitian in Ontario. Like that's how sure I was. And I think if you just take that feeling and run with it, like if you want something bad enough, it will come. It might not happen the first try or even the second try, but like just like don't forget like what you're passionate about. I think it's so important. I think the second thing is going off of the skills and abilities document. I use that so much when applying, and it was really helpful to see like kind of what a dietitian does and kind of the skills that they're looking for. I used it a lot in my cover letter, and I kind of reflected, okay, these are some of the experience I have in these areas. And I also identified learning gaps too, like some areas that I didn't really have. Okay, well let's solve this. Let's figure out what I can do to get an experience in this. So, and then going from there, I would network with dietitians either through Dietitians of Canada. There's like a member directory. You can search up a dietitian. So many are willing to do informational interviews. You can find a lot of information through there. Yeah, I think that's all. I think those are my 2 or 3 biggest things I have.
Really helpful. Really
Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add?
I would also say like those are really great, all really good advice. Something that really helped me was just getting myself out there and getting involved in opportunities that were related to nutrition, healthcare, whether you're, volunteering with NutriKids, doing, try mentoring or whatever it might be in the community, maybe like working in a clinical setting in some way. Just getting yourself out there and like trying to figure out, is this really like what I want, and getting that experience and like letting that like either grow or just figuring out what you want. And then also with that comes having things to talk about in your application and just like stories, ways that you can show them this is something that I am committed to and this is something that I think is right for me. I think that was something that really, it grew a lot of confidence in me and what I me knowing that this was the right choice for me, and I think that ended up shining through in the application. So I definitely recommend that.
I'd agree that practice is really important. Listening and talking is a big part of what any professional does. So if it doesn't go well in a pretty supportive interview process, it's going to be pretty challenging in a very difficult patient setting. So the more practice you can have listening and talking, getting comfortable with that's going to show really well. I would say talk to more dietitians and dietitian students. You never know what you'll learn, and you'll also get practice talking. And think about what value you're bringing to the program. So how do you stand out? What's awesome about you? What can you give the program that's really going to add value? Emphasize that.
Sorry, can I also just add one more thing? I really want to go off of Callie's point again with getting a lot of experience. Don't feel pressured if some of the experience you want to talk about aren't specifically nutrition or dietitian related.
You stole my line. Just kidding.
Sorry. It's true. I was just going to say, take a step back and think about the skills that you're gaining. Like, I've worked in clothing retail for 7 years. And I have probably dealt with so many customer complaints. Like you say it, I probably have gone through it. But those are really good skills to have because as a dietitian, you're dealing with people, and depending on the population that you're working with, like you're going to be doing a lot of problem solving, a lot of empathetic listening, and like all those types of skills that you kind of don't realize that you already have. I just kind of wanted to quickly point that out.
I'm really glad, and thank you, Jennifer. I'm glad you did, because that was something I had made a note of that I wanted to also highlight as well, is just demonstrate transferable skills. So I mean, certainly it is useful, and at the end I'm going to show you some listservs you can sign up for to try and get that related volunteer or work experience, but also you can learn a lot of transferable skills in other settings. So communication, problem solving, conflict resolution, critical thinking, and so that's where that required skills and abilities document could help you kind of tease out what are some of the things that I want to highlight and really reflect on your experiences and some of the transferable skills that you've learned in other settings, or maybe in a healthcare setting but not with a dietitian. And someone else also mentioned informational interviews. I thought that was also a really good tip, because some of the health authorities do have policies where they can't take kind of job shadows every time they do get requested. So, but I think you'll find most dietitians, if you say, hey, can I meet you for a coffee and do an informational interview? I bet there's a lot of dietitians out there who would say absolutely. So just knowing that it doesn't always have to be that traditional, I volunteered with a dietitian, but you really can learn about the profession in other ways as well, and that will really show through on your application. So I wanted to open it up to the audience for some questions for the panel. Two things I would ask: if your question is for somebody specific, please just state who it's for, or you can say it's for anybody on the panel to answer. I will also try to remember to repeat your question, just so that hopefully we capture it on the recording, because the microphone is pointed this way. Did anybody want to start with the first audience question?
Hi, well, thank you for all your advice. That was awesome. My question is that on the Dietetics website, it said that your increases of getting an interview, getting in, is probably higher if you do volunteer with a dietitian. But at this time of the year, they are usually very busy. I've 20 athletes, and I've had 15 of them already told me they're busy right now. So I was wondering, if we don't get to volunteer with a dietitian, is that a deal breaker?
Not at all. I know there's like a couple of peers that I have known throughout the years who have absolutely no experience. Sorry guys, it's been a bit of a long day. They have absolutely no skills. No, they have like absolutely no like dietitian, nutrition related things. I think what I was kind of saying before, it's that thinking skill where you can transfer the skills that you're gaining over to how it's applicable in the dietetic field is what's super key. And so you don't worry too much about that.
Yeah, I had the same thing. Like, I emailed so many dietitians trying to set up like shadowing or volunteering or whatever, and it's hard. And what ended up working was, again, like just getting coffee with them and like just talking to them. I got to know quite a few through personal contacts or whatnot, and that was just helpful to me. And then getting experience in other places was just the way it ended up going. Yeah.
I'd say networking too. So I don't know if you guys know, but the Dietitians of Canada Student Representative Team every year hosts Meet the Dietitian Night, where about maybe 10 to 15 dietitians from a variety of areas come, and you can do, they're kind of like a group, like kind of group style discussions. I actually got a job out of it, and it was through networking and just showing that I was very interested in like what their type of field was, and then we kind of just got that conversation going, and then I ended up getting a job from it. So just don't take that kind of out of context either. You never know what can kind of come.
Thank you.
I'll just add that one of the strategies that worked well for me was, instead of thinking about asking for their time, was thinking about offering your time and adding value in that way. So what I found worked really well is offering to do research for them. There's so many different topics in nutrition, it's impossible to stay on top of any of them, and I found most dietitians would love an offer of you kind of managing your own project and saying, I'll do a topic, let me know what you want to know more about, and I'll review 3 or 4 or 5 papers, and I'll give you the Coles notes and bring you up to speed on that. And that might be a way to kind of get in there without kind of asking for their time, but again, thinking about the value you can provide them.
And then just to build off of that, it's more, again, thinking about, it's like that pitching idea, right? So, I mean, a game you can play is, you think about like, what is going to compel someone to reply back to you? So like, if you think about how busy you are, some high school student emails you and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about UBC. Let's be honest, in the priorities of what you have in your life, you're probably not going to respond. It doesn't mean you are not being nice, it's just, it's so vague in general. So it's more just, you have to practice all these different angles, and guess what? You're probably going to get a lot of rejections, but that is not indicative of actually you learning and progressing. So, I mean, that angle's great, that research, but whatever it is for you, thinking about how do you compel someone to maybe connect back with you, right? I like the phrasing, like, love to hear your expert opinion. I think about getting specific, 10 minutes phone call, right, on this date. Like, there's ways you can practice crafting this, and again, it goes back to, you have to do it, you have to practice it. So yeah, I encourage you, because those are the very skills too that will help you in an interview, help you writing your cover letter, helping you, and it's for the rest of your career. It's influencing skills. That's hard. Yeah. I don't know how to do it all the time. I'm still learning, right? So, but you have to practice it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was a really good question. Yeah, I know that's definitely one of the struggles. Just kind of, those were some really good tips, especially the one you sent to Rob, being kind of vague. So just being able to be really direct, and also what you might be able to offer them as well. Does anyone have another question for the panel? Yeah.
I have a question on the application. Does it increase your chances of getting in the program if you're currently a UBC student?
Oh, it's a very good question. And I realized I didn't repeat the last question. So this question, I'll repeat it this time, was does it increase your chances of getting in if you are a UBC student? And to be honest, I'm going to answer it from I really don't think so, because when you look at the scoring for the packages, it's grades, right? It's your references, it's your cover letter, it's your resume. And so all of those things are actually kind of doesn't matter if it was done here, doesn't matter if it was done at SFU. So I would say definitely not. I think maybe we have more students apply from UBC just because, they hear about it, right? So we've got the posters up here and they're already maybe in LFS and they come to us for other things and then they hear about it while they're here. But I would say definitely it does not make a difference in terms of the success of your application where you've done your prerequisites. It might be a little bit more difficult to navigate in terms of needing to reach out to student services and figuring out what transfers and that type of thing. So probably a little bit more work to get it all sorted, but definitely doesn't hurt or help your chances in any way.
I can add.
Yeah.
I've worked on the admissions for a long
for
time, so I would say I get a lot of questions. I'm international. Do I still have a chance? I've heard a lot of international students don't get in. I'm from another school. Can I get in? I'm not a UBC student. Can I get in? Basically, if it's not in the criteria, we don't look at it. I'm someone that looks at the admissions every time. We don't care how many credits you're in. We don't care if you're taking 2 courses a year. If it's not part of the criteria, it's not part of the evaluation. If you've withdrawn from a class, you have a W, again, not part of the criteria. So if it's not listed, you're fine. We don't do anything outside of what's listed. It's whatever's. Dietetics is very great in that it gives you all the information it needs, and there's no hidden secrets about anything. If it's not listed, it's not there.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing too is, the applications, even your references are actually they're anonymous. So we, as a scoring committee, wouldn't actually even know if you're a UBC student or not. So it's definitely not a contributing factor, but it's a really good question. Yeah. All right. Yes.
Well, I'm really new to campus, and I was wondering if there's some more resources for practicing interviews. Because other than Rock Hall, if there's any other resources for practicing.
So I'll just repeat the question. Just someone new to campus, which is great. Welcome. Just wondering if there's any more resources on campus for practicing interviews. And I'm wondering if I could maybe direct this question to Rob, if that's okay with you, Rob, not to put you on the spot. But I know you and I have chatted a little bit about the interview piece.
So I guess if you're asking because you're looking at Brock Hall, you might not be able to access some of the things there. I think with the interview, I really honestly believe it's looking at where are you at, what are you involved with, and then thinking about the ways that you're able to kind of, again, share your story. And so what I mean by that is, if I knew the right recipe for an interview, I wouldn't be here right now because I could sell that and I'd be a billionaire. And that's why you're here. It's very difficult, right? When you're dealing with humans, different contexts and environments, just when you think you got it, suddenly you're like, oh, I got it rejected. So I would put it more to you again. I was just thinking about where are you practicing again, just communicating both from a verbal and written manner. If you want to even just go to, and I just don't think it would be the answer, it'd be you could sit down every night and practice interviewing. I don't think that appeals to many. So I always think about, again, how are you? Are you striking up conversations with people in class? That's hard to do. I think of ways that you can challenge yourself and then figure out and grow from that. But backing up, I would write down what it is that you want to try to do, specifically, because then you're able to review and think about explicitly the things you're doing. Just like when you're studying for a test, it's not that your favorite pen and the routine that you do before your exam is going to get you an A every time. It's you develop that routine to get confidence in yourself to show up properly on test day. And that's in interviews. I think all of you can do it because you've written finals. It's just like a final, right? It's a high leverage, one-time stressful opportunity to give perspective to questions that you're not really ready for, right? So I look at more like, if I was doing dietetics, I'd be thinking, well, yeah, what are the stories, what are the questions that are going to happen that I anticipate? You know, there's just variations of the same themes, and rather than memorize what you're trying to do, you're trying to maybe convey what you're about or what you're trying to answer. So I think that's really practice. But I've done lots of extreme things. I've videotaped myself, I've voice recorded myself, I've written out scripts for interviews. When it's really important to me, I will do everything in my power to ready myself and study for that interview and prep. And it doesn't always work, right? Like, I've lots of rejection, right? So, but I mean, I would just, again, think about in your capacity. If you're commuting, you can listen to your voice, you can write out some scripts. What are your stories? How are you practicing sharing those sort of things that are, again, unique to you and engaging? An interview is an opportunity for you to showcase and celebrate what you've accomplished. And it's also an opportunity because they want to like you. They want to like you. It can go quickly downhill from there, but they do want to like you, right? So how are you going to do that? And that practicing with people around you all the time.
Kind of touching off of that, something that I thought about a lot and that somebody told me was, think about the conversations that you have with people about why you want to be a dietitian, because that stuff comes through. I mean, if you're passionate about it, which I assume you all are here, you're here for a reason. And when somebody asks you what inspires you to do this, and this could be like a random person on the street, it could be your best friend, it could be your mom, like it could be anybody, and think about the things that you say and kind of draw themes kind of based on that, because if you can do that, then you can do the interview. I think the biggest thing is definitely the nerves. It's kind of the anticipation of it and like how high the stakes are, but if you can do that, then you can definitely do the interview, I think.
Sorry, I feel like there's so many. I feel like you were the quickest in the burgundy shirt.
I actually just had an addition to the very first question, because I know that you mentioned the LFS listserv.
Yes, got that on one of the last
I get emails like at least 3 times a week with volunteer opportunities with registered dietitians. So if you're looking for volunteering where people are actually putting it out there,
and some
you
paid
don't have to contact them first.
Yeah, definitely.
There's like a big, diverse range of what people are looking for, and they're looking for students.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome, thank you for that. I actually have the where to subscribe to that listserv on our second to last slide. If you're not, I imagine a lot of you probably already are on the listserv, but for those of you who aren't, you're right, we do get a lot that goes out. Out to you guys for volunteer and paid opportunities. They're not all with registered dietitians, but I would say the majority of them are. So, thank you. Any other questions for our panel?
Yeah, I'll just go. My question is for a question. So if we are not UBC student or we already graduated from UBC, and we still want to apply this dietitian program, so the program still look at our GPA or grade is about 60%.
Yes, so the GPA, the GPA cutoff is the same regardless of if you're applying from UBC or outside of UBC or coming back to UBC. It's just obviously if you're applying later, it might be they've taken more courses that are going to be considered, right? And maybe Sarah can speak to that a little bit more, but they're looking at your prereqs and any 3rd and 4th year courses you may have already completed that are counting towards the dietetics degree. Yeah, did you want to add a little bit?
Student services jump in?
Yeah.
So I think the question, it depends on if you graduated from the Faculty of Land and Food Systems before or not. So I would answer it first, if you have not graduated from the Faculty of Land and Food Systems, but you graduated from another UBC degree, as she was saying, it's the same. It's the same for both, but there are more policies around it. But you still have to meet the same prerequisites. You still have to meet the same GPA cutoffs, and we only look at appropriate 1st and 2nd year courses and any applicable 3rd and 4th year classes. We get a lot of questions. I've done a master's degree. Do I look at the master's courses? You're treated exactly like every other student. So every student is treated the exact same way. so that it's fair. So that's kind of as an undergrad degree student. The only thing is a second degree, if you are doing dietetics as a second degree, you have to do at least 50% of your degree or 73 credits while in dietetics if you get in. So if you've done like a lot of the first, second, third, and fourth year of dietetics, getting in, you don't get to speed up the process. You're again just like any other student. If you get admitted in third year, it's a 3-year degree program. So a lot of students that sometimes get asked, can I speed it up and just do like a year of coursework? You can still get admitted in third year. You got third year with your coworkers, with your classmates, fourth year with your classmates, and then internship. It's not called internship anymore.
Practice education.
Sorry, it's a lot of us have it. And then so second degree, you're just, I don't mean to say like you're just like every student, but you are just like every student. It just makes it fair, and then every student's treated the same. The one thing that I would say, if you have a previous degree, you may just have different or more life experience. You may have worked or volunteered more, or have more to kind of add to your application to maybe separate you from other students, but GPA-wise, you're the same. And then if you're a student who is in the Faculty of Law and Food Systems in Nutrition and is looking if they should graduate or not before applying to dietetics, I definitely recommend checking in with Student Services. This is kind of where it gets a little bit complicated. And because the 2 degrees, if you do dietetics and nutrition, then you do dietetics, it's a little bit complicated because there's so much overlap with coursework. So that'd be a great time to chat with someone from Student Services about the pros and cons of whether or not you want to finish your degree and then apply to dietetics, or don't apply to graduate and then get into dietetics. I don't know if that made sense, but second degree students are the most complicated, so I would say in the best way, you have a previous degree, but just really make sure you're checking with us because there's a little bit more of the policy to kind of look at it, and then just make sure how long it was since if you finished a degree a long time ago, there might be some conversation about if your degree is from 20 years ago, might have to do some upgrading. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. That was a really good question. Thank you for adding the extra detail. I definitely would have made
That question comes up every year, so I was ready for it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the tribe mentoring, and the deadline is tomorrow. Could you please talk more about this? How to
I'm just going to repeat it really quickly for the camera, so quiet, and the microphone's facing me. So she was just asking, Rob mentioned the LFS Try mentoring, and so just looking for a little bit more information on how to sign up for that since the deadline is tomorrow. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, so if you just, I don't know the link off my top of my head. If you just Google UBC,
If you search LFS Try mentoring, it comes up. That's how I find it.
And then make sure you're applying to the mentee application. And so we have, I guess I can say the numbers, I'm not supposed to, but we have 86 mentors this year, and you'll get paired up. Mentor will have 2 students, so that means we have capacity for 172 students. I think it will be the largest Try mentoring on campus, so we're pretty proud of it. Our goal was to hit about 80, which is 10%, but I know that we had an influx of mentors just last week, and so we still have a little bit more space. We're probably close to, we extended the deadline because we have some more space available for students. So again, you might want to consider applying. We try to not put a lot of work on you in terms of like the actual activities, and we try to make them relevant in terms of opportunity to practice. Like the first activity is always like an elevator pitch. We have a kickoff event, there's an orientation. I don't know, Callie, was there anything that you got out of it that might persuade some of these people to consider it?
Yeah, honestly, like a lot of the activities when I first read them, I thought that they seemed pretty like simple, but I got so much more out of them looking back than I thought I did. Just like career building in terms of like learning how to do an elevator pitch and accomplishment statements on your resumes. And I was lucky enough to get paired with a dietitian mentor, which was amazing. She ended up actually being a reference on my application, which was phenomenal. But even just like hearing about her day to day and just being a professional in that field was so rewarding. And just getting coffee, I still exchange emails with her. Just like building that professional network of people. It was a really good program. I definitely recommend it to anyone who's at all interested.
Yeah, it's pretty, like if you search LFS Try mentoring, you'll see where it's like mentor application and mentee application. It's pretty intuitive once you find the website. It's all online. Yeah.
So I understand that it's not uncommon for applicants to get accepted without letters of reference directly from a dietitian, but is it absolutely crucial to have a reference who can speak on your suitability to a clinical setting? And then moreover, how is that kind of determined, like your suitability to be in a clinical setting?
So I'm just going to repeat the question. She's just asking, so there are 2 references that are required for the application package, and she's wondering if it's, kind of a deal breaker if one of them isn't from a registered dietitian, and also wondering if they need to kind of comment on your suitability for the clinical setting. I'll start this one off, and then, because I feel like you guys would, having been through it recently, Rob probably hasn't really taken a look at the reference piece, but you can actually see what the reference form looks like if you go and you take a look at the application package. So if you go on our website, it does say that it doesn't have to be, but it is encouraged to try and at least get one reference from a dietitian. But yeah, I mean, someone who's worked with you and been your supervisor in a different capacity could still comment on all of the qualities that are asked about in that reference. Like if you look at it, it's not like only a dietitian could answer these questions. I'm kind of like on the fence with this question because I do feel like if at all possible, it is beneficial but it's not a deal breaker. And I think I might ask Heather to kind of jump in here on this one a little bit too.
I can add to that. I went through the program here. I did not have a reference from a dietitian, and I didn't have work experience with a dietitian because I didn't have access to that where I was living before I was a second degree student. I was living not here, and there just weren't really a lot of opportunities around. So it's certainly possible to do, but I had people who could speak in a professional capacity to the kind of professional that I was working. And people who maybe worked in healthcare settings in a different environment. It could be like a nurse or an OT, someone who is familiar with the requirements of what a dietitian might need to do and could still speak to your transferable skills in that setting.
Yeah, that's helpful, thank you. So it is one of those like difficult, and I think every situation is so different, right? So every application is different, and so there could be a really strong application where the references didn't come from a dietitian, or there could be a weak application that the references did come from a dietitian, right? So we really have to, it's scored, and I think if I go back, I think the references are 5%, so keeping in mind, right, that is, in terms of the weighting, it is not as heavily weighted as some of the other components of your application package. So not to say they're not important, it's very important, but just keeping that in mind. And it really is, I think, your application package as a whole. So I guess kind of similar to what Heather was saying, try not to get too hung up on that detail, I guess I would say. And the reference form is there for you to take a look at. So I mean, do definitely ask someone who you feel confident can comment on those skills of yours, right? Because you don't want to ask someone who's and has to put a lot of can't comment, I don't know, because that's not going to be a very strong reference. So just make sure that it is someone that really has worked with you long enough and does know you well enough to give you a really good reference, because that's what you want. Good question. So just looking at the time, we do have about 10 more minutes for the panel discussion piece, so that's probably time for 2 more questions, I would think. Do we have any others? I feel like you guys have had really good questions. Yeah.
If you do research in a non-nutritional related topic, would it still be beneficial for your, technical skills that you're talking about?
If you've done research?
Research in a non-nutritional topic, like living brain or something.
Yeah.
More towards not eating food.
Do you mean as work or volunteer experience? Yeah, definitely. I think, again, just kind of going back to looking at the required skills and abilities document, you probably have to communicate, you probably have to think critically, you probably have to problem solve, right? And all of those things, even if your research isn't related to nutrition per se, a lot of transferable skills there. I don't know if there's anyone on the panel who kind of wants to comment a little bit more on that piece, thinking even about your experience with the research module and practice education, maybe some of the skills that she would have from that would be transferable there.
I think if you've done anything awesome, you should definitely tell them about it.
Yeah.
Doing research will definitely set you apart from a lot of other applicants. So even though it's not dietetics related, like I said, like think about what you're bringing to this program. Maybe you drive race cars. It has nothing to do with nutrition, but it's something unique, something that brands you, something that helps you stand out. So absolutely, if you do cool stuff, you should tell us about it, yes.
Think about, okay, dietitians are evidence-based nutrition experts. So as Evan was saying, like you do a research module in your practice education, but all dietitians have very, very good research skills. So having research, whether it's in nutrition or it's in like a completely opposite end of the spectrum, those skills are still so transferable, and you can definitely use that to your advantage.
And then I think the last part of it is like, you know, Evan's saying, talk about things that you're awesome with, and I think that's actually a good way to think about it. But what's really hard for all of us in this room is it's sometimes hard to believe what we have is actually something. Like the way you do things, we forget that it's unique. And I think that's the difficulty with it when sometimes you don't have a direct relation, or you're saying research, because you actually then have to spend a little bit more time and practice to clarify and share that story. There's a reason why being in dietitian's nice. When you have a professional standing, there's a lot of shorthand that you don't have to explain. Like if you're applying for a dietetics job, you're not like, oh, I see you're a dietitian, I don't know if you can do this, right? But if you're like, you don't have to sell that. So, but that's kind of the analogy, right? So you have, I like to always think of what is the relevant experience, right? So volunteer, paid work, extracurricular, as long as you're telling a story of how it's relevant to the dietetics profession, then yeah, that's what I would consider presenting.
Thank you guys, really good. Yes.
This is probably a listener question. One of the admission comments that we should not choose to reference who work at the same or in the same context. Does it mean like we should not choose to reference who work at the same place?
I missed a lot. There was a little bit of rustling. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat that for me?
One of the admission requirements that we should not choose referees who work in the same context. Does it mean we should not choose to referees who work at the same place?
Right, two references who know you in the same kind of capacity. Yeah, I do believe, I'd have to go back to refresh my memory, but I do believe they asked for two references from different contexts, so you wouldn't want to choose, you know, both your supervisors from the same job, for instance. And I know that can be difficult to find. I don't know if Rob, if you have any tips in terms of like kind of finding like references. I think often thinking kind of a little bit of like, I don't know, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be a dietitian. It's helpful if it is, but it's really the strength of your application overall as a whole. But I do believe one of the requirements is to choose two references from different, that know you in a different capacity, right? That aren't working with you in the exact same scenario day to day. Good question though.
I think that's why references are difficult, right?
They are difficult, yeah.
It's not, you know, if you need a reference next month,
and you work one job.
Yeah, you have to think about, that's why wherever you're at right now, it always goes back to relationships, right? So the quality, the length of it that you know people, it's very apparent in a reference whether the quality, because if they're talking broadly, you know, I have students asking me for references. So if I know them really well, I'll write them the best reference, you know, that because I believe that they deserve that. But if I don't know them well, it's not that I don't want to help them. I just don't know much to say. And you can see that in the quality of the references. So it again goes back to the very beginning where we're talking about practicing these human skills. Like the references are going to be a direct correlation to the type of relationships and the ways that you show up in your work and all those sort of things are in your class, right? So, and that's hard to cram, right? At the, you know, when you suddenly need the reference. So for those of you like first year, second year, now's a real good time to start thinking about how you're planting those seeds. But the tri-mentoring reference that Kelly was talking about was because that was meeting them multiple times over a year and having conversations and being vulnerable, all these sort of things. So yeah, it is hard though when you have good two quality at one place, but you might want to start just again digging around. You'd be surprised again, maybe it's a family friend and that sort of thing, but you do want to take a little bit of an inventory if you're at this point where you're like, okay, I need one, right?
I should add to the references, it does say in the application package, they can't be a professor that's kind of only worked with you in the classroom setting. So you might have a professor that might know you fairly well, but if their only kind of involvement with you has been as a professor, versus it'd be different if you were working with them on a research project and they were your supervisor for a research project, then it would be okay. So that's another, it's all kind of laid out there in terms, like you mentioned about the 2 different sources, but so really, start thinking about that now. That's not something you can cram in the night before. Do give your references ample time to write, right? So you have to hand it in on January 30th. Don't ask them for a reference on January 29th, because you want to give them time knowing that they're busy, but also so that if they do know you well, that they can write you a really awesome reference. And speaking from someone who has written quite a few of them, like they do take some time. They're not easy to pull off overnight. Yeah. I think we have time for 1 to 2 more questions, depending on how long and complicated they are. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. It's probably more for the administrators. I'm just wondering if you can give us a good idea of what competitive GPA looks like as opposed to the environment.
That's a really good question, and I'm going to be completely honest, I cannot. I just started in June, but I think Sarah would probably be able to help us a little bit with this one.
Yes, I get asked this a lot. So, competitive average. And I was talking about, so the minimum is 70, and as most people know, you probably need higher. But the reality is, if you're coming with low 70s, you present a really strong competitive application in your resume, your cover letter, your references, and you do well in an internship, you could still get in. We have students who have, no one has a 95% average, but let's say we had someone with a 95% average. Just because they have a 95% average doesn't mean that they're going to do well in the rest of their application. So it really is like a holistic view on everything. So if you have just 70, as Rob was saying, apply. I told a student 2 years ago to apply, and she's like, there's no way I'm getting in. She got in. I told it again 3 years ago. I'm always telling students like Rob to just apply. If you think 70 isn't good enough, it probably is. You just got to apply to find out. And if it's not, don't take it as a bad thing. Use it to fuel your fire, as I would say, to make a better application for the next year. So competitive, if you aim for higher than 70, that's great, but I don't have documented what the average was last year, and I've found that year after year, everyone wants to know the specific overall average of the students that got in last year, but the reality is that's a different applicant pool. This is a new applicant pool, and next year's will be different. So what it was last year, the year before, it doesn't really matter in a sense, because it depends on what everyone here kind of has their average. So if you have 70, apply. If you have 71, apply. If you have 70.5, apply. If you have 90, apply. But just, if you think you meet the requirements, just apply. You won't know until you find out. But it changes every year, and I just think you're probably stronger in application than you think you are.
I just wanted to quickly point out that I had a 70 when I applied, and I almost didn't do it. I had this one girl that I knew that's a year above me and was like, you're applying this year. And I was like, I'm not applying. I have a 70. I'm never going to get it. And then don't do it. I didn't apply with 3 weeks left in advance. Maybe give yourself a little bit of time. But the reason why I waited is because I was so unsure about it and I was so doubtful about it. And my friend was like, just do it. I think you'll be fine. And I kind of just took that and scrambled everything. Don't do that. Maybe not the greatest for your mental health, maybe, to get that done so quickly. But like I said, it's totally possible.
And don't compare to others just because you have 70 and you don't think your experiences are good enough. It's not true. Everyone is different. Everyone presents unique applications, and use that to your advantage. Don't compare to others. There's a lot of myths going around about dietetics. I get it all the time. I heard someone a few weeks ago that I have a 90% average. There's no way I'm getting in because I heard the average have to be above 90. It's not true. So I heard it all. I get it all. But don't listen to what you see. Don't be reading what's on Reddit. I heard those terms about Reddit too. Really, if you have 70, trust yourself and just apply and you know it in. It's not a bad thing. Just use it to really work on your application again.
Well, thank you all for your great questions. I think I'm going to wrap up the panel discussion part of our session, and then I just have a couple of a little bit more information to share to wrap up the session. But those were some really, really great questions, and yeah, a lot of them, the answer is not on our website, so there's the kinds of questions that we like to talk about in the panel discussion. Every application is unique, every situation is unique, and I think that those are really good words of wisdom from Sarah at the end there. So I just wanted to point you to some places where you can stay in touch with what's happening with the program. So this is the one that somebody mentioned earlier. Really encourage you to subscribe to the FNH listserv, or I think it's FNH volunteer listserv. So this is where we send out, it's been like quite a bit lately, opportunities for a lot of volunteers, some paid opportunities, and these are good opportunities for learning more about the profession, right? So learning more about kind of diverse areas that dietitians may work in. And even if you're not interested in applying for that particular opportunity that comes out, you might look at it and go, oh, that's neat, I didn't know a dietitian could, it's almost like a little bit of research just to read the job or the volunteer description. And the other thing it can do is if you do decide to apply and get one of those volunteer or paid positions, it's a good resume builder. It's a good way to show that you've really assessed and decided that this is a career that you are suitable for and that you're really committed to doing it, and just really focusing on those skills that you're gaining that you can apply to be a successful dietitian. You can follow us on social media. So we have a Twitter and Facebook account. So we post, things like about today's event we posted on there. So it's good to keep in touch that way. For any of you who are already in LFS, you can read the LFS newsletters that comes out every week for updates there. And then I also wanted to highlight a session that, just for you to save the date, that Rob's going to help us out with. We are going to do a resume and cover letter session in November. Same time as this session, just trying not to conflict with classes, but also trying to be able to book a room is the other piece. So I know this time hopefully works for most students. And it's going to be over in Macmillan, so it's will be really focused on getting your resume and your cover letter polished up. And as someone who's done a cover letter and resume many times, I feel like every time I do it, there's always something to learn to polish it up. So I would really encourage you to attend that one. I just really wanted to first off thank our panelists for attending. I know it was really busy time of year for everybody, so thank you to our students, and thank you to Rob and Sarah from our other teams here on UBC campus. I wanted to thank my dietitian program colleagues for joining me, and Nicole for manning the camera, and I also wanted to thank all of you guys for attending. So I hope you got what you were looking for, and please feel free to be in touch.